It was Easter Sunday in upstate New York, and the family house smelled like lemon polish and glazed ham. I hadn't been home in years, but my husband, David, offered to help my mother, Linda, and father, Gerald, clean out the attic, something they'd been meaning to do since the Clinton administration. I thought it'd be nothing more than a stroll down memory lane, with dusty wreaths and tangled Christmas lights, but that day it shattered the life I thought I knew. David was always the quiet observer, the steady one who notices what others ignore. I was knee-deep in a bean of old cords when I noticed he'd gone still. He crouched behind a stack of boxes, eyes fixed on something. Then he turned to me, pale as linen, and whispered, "Don't react, wait until your mom leaves." That one sentence changed everything. I'm Mary, and this is the story of what my husband uncovered in my parents' attic, a truth buried for nearly 2 decades. It involves a hidden trust fund, a grandmother I never really knew, and a betrayal by the 2 people I trusted most. And at the center of it all was my sister, Rachel, the family's golden child, whose perfect life may not have been built by merit, but by theft. What we found in that attic, it wasn't just boxes. It was the start of a reckoning. I waited until my mother was all the way downstairs cheerfully humming some Michael Bublé song before I moved toward David. He didn't speak. He just stepped aside and pointed to the wall. There, behind a stack of old rugs and dusty photo albums, was a barely visible seam in the insulation, like someone had tried to cover it up in a hurry. My hands, steady but cold, moved aside. The clutter tucked behind the wallboard was a simple cardboard box, nothing ornate, just taped shut, worn at the corners. David didn't touch it. He knew better. This was mine to open. Inside was a cream-colored legal folder. I knew immediately it was something important, something someone had once wanted hidden but not destroyed. And the strangest thing, my name was printed right there on the front, Mary Elaine Thompson. In bold type, no mistake. I looked at David. He didn't say a word, but his face told me everything. He'd seen what was inside. He had opened it just enough to know that I needed to see it with my own eyes. So I did. The first thing that hit me was the date. It was from 2006, the year I turned 18. Then I saw the heading, Revocable Trust Agreement. It took a moment to register. I turned the page, and there it was, Sylvia Bennett. The woman I had grown up calling Aunt Sylvia had created a trust fund for me, not for my parents, not for Rachel, for me. The documents were airtight, notarized, sealed, with clear instructions that the trust was to be disclosed to me on my 18th birthday. At WSN single quotes T. Instead, it had been tucked away, hidden in the attic, behind insulation and lies tucked between the papers was a letter, handwritten, in the looping cursive I remembered from birthday cards and holiday notes. It was Sylvia's handwriting. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. My dearest Mary, if you're reading this, I'm no longer. Heed, and I pray that your guardians have honored my wish to tell you the truth by now. But if you're finding this on your own, then they haven't, and I'm sorry. My name is Sylvia. You've always known me as your great-aunt, but the truth is I'm your grandmother. Your mother Celia was my only daughter. She passed away when you were still very young. Too young to remember her clearly, but not too young to be loved. After her death, your Aunt Carol and her husband Gerald took you in. For that, I was grateful. But it was my deepest wish that you would grow up knowing who you were and where you came from. That's why I set up this trust for you, so you would have something that was entirely yours when the time was right. I stopped reading. My ears were ringing, like the air in the attic had changed. My chest was tight, my hands ice cold. Every moment of my childhood shifted. Every memory I thought was mine now cast in doubt. My mother Carol was not my mother. My father Gerald was not my father. Rachel wasn't my sister. I wasn't the background character in their perfect family story. I was the daughter of Celia Bennett, and I was meant to know. But I never did. I looked at David, who knelt beside me and rested a hand gently on my back. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. My whole life had been wrapped in ribbons of silence and half-dashed truths. And now the truth sat in my lap creased. Yellowed and decades overdue, we left that attic without another word. My mother handed me a container of leftovers as we walked out the front door, as if the foundation of my identity hadn't just been ripped out from under me. I smiled, thanked her, and carried a lie under my coat. That night, David sat with me at the kitchen table while I unfolded the letter again. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence said what I couldn't. The woman who raised me hadn't just hidden money, she'd hidden my life. I didn't sleep that night. The trust document sat in the middle of the kitchen table, lit by the soft glow of the overhead pendant light. I must have reread the letter from Sylvia a dozen times. I kept hoping, irrationally, that I'd misunderstood something, that maybe my parents had meant to tell me but lost the courage. That maybe Rachel didn't know, that maybe this wasn't theft, but deep down, I knew better. By sunrise, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this be another secret buried in the attic. I called a lawyer. His name was Ben Maxwell. Older gentleman, calm voice, kind eyes, the kind of man who makes you feel like you're doing the right thing even when your world is upside down. I handed him the folder, and he didn't even blink. He nodded slowly and said, "First step, we'll file a formal demand for accounting. They're legally required to provide a full breakdown of where the money went." And just like that, it began. The letter was sent out by the end of the week. I imagined it landing on my parents' porch in one of those white legal-size envelopes, typed neatly, almost harmless looking. But I knew better. It was a grenade wrapped in civility. I didn't hear anything on day 1, but on day 2, right at 10 a.m., my phone rang. Caller ID, Mom. I let it ring once. Then I picked up. She didn't say hello. Her voice came through sharp, already halfway into a scolding. "Are you serious? You're suing us? After everything we've done for you?" I didn't respond. She snapped louder, "You ungrateful little girl. You wouldn't even be here if it weren't for us." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so familiar. That tone, that manufactured outrage. The way she made herself the victim. Before I'd even spoken a word. "Carol," I said, deliberately. "Not Mom, not anymore. Don't call me that," she hissed. Too late, from the background, I heard Gerald's voice, angry, defiant. "Tell her we'll fight it. We're not letting her destroy everything." Of course, they had me on speakerphone. "You're not a victim," Carol said coldly. "We made choices as parents. You weren't supposed to make those choices for me," I replied. She didn't like that. "You've always been so sensitive," she scoffed. "Maybe if you'd asked more questions as a child, you were supposed to tell me the truth," I said, my voice flat. She dodged. "We didn't want to traumatize you. You were so fragile." "Where did the money go?" I asked. Finally, silence. I pushed again. "Was it used for Rachel?" Carol's jaw clenched so hard I could hear it through the phone. Gerald spoke this time, quietly. Like delivering a final blow, "It went to someone who deserved it." That was the moment. Not just the end of the call, but the end of any illusion I had left. I hung up. I sat there, in my kitchen, staring at my phone as if it had just cursed me. But I didn't cry. Not anymore. There was no sadness left, only a cold, clear understanding. They had stolen not just my money but my future, every opportunity I never got, every job I couldn't afford to take, every apartment I struggled to pay for. Every time I felt like I wasn't enough. They had funded Rachel's perfect life with my inheritance, the scholarships she bragged about, paid from my trust. The startup capital for her wellness company, pulled from my name, the business grants, labeled under me. but deposited into her account. And through it all, she smiled into cameras and told the world she had built it herself from scratch. That was when I knew this wasn't just about money. It was about identity. It was about justice. It was about no longer staying silent while someone else built a kingdom on my foundation. The next morning, I emailed my lawyer, "We proceed," and include Rachel. Asterisk 2 days after I told my lawyer to proceed, there was a knock at the door. No text, no warning, just 3 sharp raps that sent my heart straight into my throat when I opened it. Carol and Gerald were standing there like they'd just come from Sunday service. She was holding a plastic container of snickerdoodles, her signature peace offering from every childhood argument. Gerald stood with his arms crossed, looking like a man who'd been forced to show up and wanted credit for it. "We thought we should talk face to face," Carol said, her smile pulled so tight it looked painful. Like a family. David was in the next room. He looked up from the kitchen but didn't step in. He knew I could handle this, and he knew I needed to. I let them in. Carol made a beeline for the couch and launched right in, her words rehearsed. Like a PTA speech, "This is a misunderstanding, Mary, an overreaction. You've always been dramatic." Gerald remained standing, silent but smug. The kind of presence that filled a room by doing nothing at all. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she continued. "It wasn't some crime. We made choices. We did what we thought was best." I stared at her for a long moment. "You weren't supposed to make those choices without me," I said, each word slow and deliberate. "You used my inheritance for someone else. You buried the truth about my mother. You stole from me. We raised you," Gerald finally spoke, his voice flat. "That trust wouldn't even exist if it weren't for us." I stood. "Where did the money go?" Carol blinked like I'd slapped her. "What?" "The money," I repeated. "The trust. Where did it go?" She faltered. For the first time, her polished front cracked. "Did it go to Rachel?" She didn't deny it. Instead, she scoffed. "Oh, please. What would you have even done with it?" "Buy another 1-bedroom apartment with creaky floors." Gerald stepped forward. His voice dropped to that quiet, dangerous register I remembered from my teen years, the one that said a threat was coming dressed as advice. It went to someone who earned it. That was it. The moment. The final nail. They left the cookies on the coffee table like it made a difference. As they walked out, Carol turned and said, "You're not our daughter anymore. Hope you're happy." I didn't answer. I watched them leave. And when the door closed behind them, something settled in my chest. Not peace, not yet, but a strange clarity, like the fog had finally lifted. David walked over, placed his hand gently on my shoulder, and said only, "Tea." Later that night, I sat down at my laptop and typed out a short message to Ben, my attorney. "Proceed with the suit. Include Rachel. No settlement." A few days later, their response came in by email. No greeting. No apology. Just one number, $150,000. If I agreed to drop the matter entirely, they'd wire it within the week. David read the message first and quietly slid the laptop across the table to me. "That's more than enough," the message read. "You didn't earn it anyway." At the bottom, in bold type, was one last insult. "You were never the ambitious one." Cute. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because the offer was tempting, but because the audacity was staggering. They really believed that money could buy silence, that I'd trade justice for a check, that I'd let Rachel keep what was mine and walk away like the grateful little girl they always expected me to be. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. They stole my identity. They rewrote my past. And now they wanted me to stay quiet about it. Not a chance. The offer sat in my inbox for 2 days before I officially declined it. No counteroffer, no negotiation, just one sentence. Typed back to my lawyer, "We're going all the way." And we did. The court date came faster than I expected. Maybe because part of me still believed they'd find some last-minute decency and back down. But they didn't. Carol and Gerald showed up to the hearing in their Sunday best Carol with a neutral cardigan draped over her shoulders, Gerald with a fresh haircut and a face carved from stone. Rachel didn't come to the first few appearances. She was probably too busy preserving her image for whatever camera crew she had on standby that week, but eventually she had no choice. When the subpoena came, she had to sit down and face it. The judge was a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a low bun. She had the demeanor of someone who had seen everything and had no time for nonsense. She called the courtroom to order like she was clearing clutter from a kitchen counter. Brisk, focused, final. My attorney, Ben, was a quiet force. He didn't raise his voice, didn't throw accusations. He simply laid out facts paper by paper, date by date, the trust Sylvia Bennett had created. The instructions to transfer all assets to me at age 18, the guardianship agreements, the bank withdrawals, the wire transfers, the reclassified scholarship payments, the business seed funds that had gone directly to Rachel. There were no guesses, no theories, just records. Then came the screenshots, Rachel's business website, plastered with language about self-made success, humble beginnings, and rising from nothing. Her social media, filled with quotes about hustle, grit, and girl bossing your way to the top. Her interviews, where she looked into the camera with glossy eyes and said, "No one handed me anything. I built this on my own," but the financial trail told another story. My story. Rachel's lawyer tried to soften it, claimed she had no knowledge of the origins of the funds, that she was just a teenager when the business was started. But the emails told the truth. Her name on transfer requests, her digital signature on bank deposits, notes in her own handwriting, referring to Mom's account and use Mary's side to cover tuition. She had known, they all had, when it was finally my turn to speak. The judge asked if I had anything to say before the ruling. I stood, my knees shook slightly, but I kept my voice steady. I was raised in a house that told me to be grateful for leftovers, grateful for being tolerated. I was told my life would always be second place because someone else was meant to shine. But that shine was paid for with my inheritance, my future, my identity. This trust wasn't just money. It was the one thing my real family tried to leave behind for me, and they buried it. Then I sat down. The courtroom went still. The judge didn't hesitate. Her decision was clear, firm, and final. Rachel's business was to be liquidated. All assets remaining would be transferred to me. Carol and Gerald were ordered to provide a full financial accounting for every cent spent from the trust. Rachel was not only disqualified from further access, she was formally held responsible for the portion she knowingly accepted. They didn't argue. They didn't cry. They didn't even look at me. Carol sat like a statue, hands folded in her lap, as if still playing the role of the devoted mother. Gerald stared straight ahead like a man watching his own house go up in flames. Rachel didn't even glance in my direction. When the gavel came down, it was quiet, but in my heart, it sounded like thunder. The moment wasn't triumphant, it was sobering. Years of silence, manipulation, and erasure had been exposed in a few weeks of legal proceedings. They had built their perfect image using bricks made from my legacy, but now their lies had finally collapsed, and I was still standing. 2 weeks after the ruling, the first wire transfer hit my account. It wasn't the full amount, not yet, but it was enough to make my breath hitch when I saw the balance, enough to make me sit down at the kitchen table, stare out the window, and whisper to myself, "It's finally mine." But it wasn't just about the money. It never had been. It was about the silence that followed. Carol and Gerald didn't call. No apologies, no explanations. No late-night confessions or attempts at redemption. Rachel disappeared completely, vanishing from social media and press appearances like a bad investment quietly scrubbed from a portfolio. What I did get, though, were whispers. A neighbor messaged me on Facebook, someone I hadn't spoken to since. "High school, heard about the ruling. Can't believe they did that to you. We all thought you and Rachel were just different." Then came the article, not a front page expose, but a modest piece buried somewhere on page 6 of the local paper. Wellness startup to close following private legal settlement. No quotes, no photos, no real details. Just a clean, quiet ending. They sold the house, too. The one I grew up in, the one that once felt like a museum of other people's accomplishments, was quietly listed, and within a few weeks, gone. Word got around that Carol and Gerald had moved to a rental home 2 towns over. Nothing fancy, no columns, no stone driveway, just a beige ranch with a cracked mailbox and a for rent sticker barely peeled off the front door. Rachel moved back in with them, recalibrating, someone said. I had to laugh. That was what she used to call her $39 digital workshop for women going through breakups or job losses. And now, here she was living the very life she marketed to fix. Then came the email. No subject line, no greeting, just one sentence. "You've destroyed everything. You were never one of us." Carol, of course, I didn't respond. I didn't even show it to David. I just deleted it, closed my laptop, and let the silence settle. And yet, even with the money in my account, the legal battle behind me, and the truth out in the open, I couldn't quite sleep. Not the way I wanted to. Some nights, I'd sit on the edge of our bed while David slept and Ray read Sylvia's letter. It was worn now, the creases deep from so many times I'd opened it. The ink was fading just slightly on the corners, but every word still hit the same. I created this trust so you would have something solid, a foundation, a future that would be entirely yours, for the first time in my life. I had something that was mine, but peace doesn't arrive like a winning lottery ticket or a clean court verdict. It's quieter than that, slower. It slips in during ordinary moments, like when you make coffee without dread, or when the phone rings and you no longer flinch. David and I moved. Not far, just a few miles outside of town, smaller house, but bigger windows, no ghosts in the corners, no attic filled with secrets, just space, light, and a garden I planned to ignore for 3 months and then suddenly obsess over like it's the centerpiece of my redemption arc. David cooks more now. I love more now. And Rachel. I hear whispers here and there. She's rebuilding. Apparently, maybe she is, maybe she isn't. I don't care. They all thought taking the money would make me bitter. But it didn't. Single quotas. It made me free. They told me I was never one of them. They were right. There's something strangely humbling about starting over in your 50s. The world assumes you should have it all figured out by now, that your roots are deep, your path well tread, your story settled. But I had just discovered that the story I'd been living wasn't even mine. For weeks after we moved, I didn't tell anyone what I planned to do next. I didn't journal about it, didn't post about it, didn't make a vision board like Rachel used to preach about in her videos. I just breathed for the first time. In my life, I had the space to stand still without being compared, corrected, or cut down. There was no deadline, no audience, no performance, just me and the quiet. David understood. He didn't ask for a roadmap or a 5-year plan. He made me coffee in the morning, grilled salmon on Sunday nights, and let me have the silence I needed. Some nights we'd sit in the living room with a lamp on and no TV, just the sound of the wind through the trees and the occasional clink of his spoon in his teacup. One afternoon, I got a call from a woman named Marisol. The name tugged at something In my memory, turns out she was a childhood friend of my mother, my real mother, Celia. I was so sorry to hear what happened, she said, her voice warm but cautious. I didn't know you knew the truth now. We met for coffee the next day at a little cafe off Main Street. Marisol brought a photo album, not one from Facebook or Instagram, no filters, no captions. Just faded snapshots of a life that had been tucked away with me. There were pictures of Celia in her 20s, long curly hair, an infectious smile, paint on her jeans. One photo showed her cradling a baby on the front steps of a house. I didn't recognize. She was wild in the best way, Marisol said, smiling wistfully. So creative, so full of life. She was completely in love with you. Hearing those words undid something in me. All those years, I thought I was born from obligation. A mistake Carol and Gerald had tried to cover with polite lies and casserole dishes, but I wasn't a burden. I was loved deeply, fiercely, even if only for a short while, and suddenly I didn't feel like I was floating anymore. I had roots. Not the kind grown from duty, but from devotion. I went home that evening and took out Sylvia's letter again. I read it slowly, carefully, like it might reveal something new. It didn't. But this time I read it not from a place of grief but of gratitude. Sylvia had fought for me in the only way she knew how. With legal paperwork, with bank accounts, with a handwritten letter she hoped would survive the silence. And it did. It had carried me all the way here. That night, I stood barefoot on our back porch, wrapped in a cardigan, watching the sky shift. From pink to deep blue, a breeze rustled the leaves, and somewhere in the distance, a wind chime played a few soft notes. I didn't feel victorious. I felt real, for the first time in decades. I wasn't playing catch-up. I wasn't trying to prove my worth or earn my place. I simply existed. As Mary Bennett, daughter of Celia, granddaughter of Sylvia. And finally, mine. These days I don't rush. I wake up when the sunlight creeps across our hardwood floors. David's usually already downstairs, reading the paper, brewing coffee the old-fashioned way, slow, patient, intentional. It's a rhythm I never knew I needed. A life not built on performance or pleasing others, but on presence. I don't spend much time thinking about Carol, Gerald, or even Rachel. Whatever narrative they've chosen to tell themselves is theirs to live with now. I've laid mine to rest, and the silence between us, it no longer aches, it heals. I still have Sylvia's letter, folded neatly in a cedar box on my nightstand. Some nights I read it not because I need the words, but because they remind me someone saw me for who I really was, long before I ever had the chance to see it myself. I've started writing again, nothing grand, just scribbles in a notebook. I write about the trees outside our window, about the scent of fresh laundry, about the way peace doesn't come with trumpets or applause, but in the soft settling of your soul when you finally stop chasing approval. A few weeks ago, I stood in front of a mirror and said my full name out loud. I am Mary Bennett. I said it again, slower, firmer. I am Mary Bennett, daughter of Celia, granddaughter of Sylvia. No one corrected me. No one rolled their eyes. No one compared me to anyone else. It was just me, standing there, and it was enough. I never thought my life would begin again in my 50s. But maybe it didn't begin again. Maybe it just began, finally, on my terms. If there's one truth I've come to believe with every fibre of my being, it's this: you are not too old, too late, or too far gone to reclaim your story, whether you're 35 or 75. You can stand up, speak your truth, and choose a new chapter. Even if the people around you spent years trying to define you, it is never too late to say, that's not who I am anymore. You are allowed to grow, you are allowed to heal, and you are absolutely allowed to begin again. Now it's your turn. Have you ever had to start over later in life? Have you uncovered a truth that changed everything? I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. Someone else might need to hear that they're not alone. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you that healing is possible at any age, please consider subscribing to the channel. We share real stories for real people, stories about second chances, quiet strength, and finding your voice when the world tries to silence you. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is finally tell the truth.